Hi guys, Charlie here and welcome to this video where we're going to talk about foot care for ultra runners. So in particular we're looking at how we can keep our feet in the best possible condition as we do these longer races. So typically on the trails you can often end up getting wet feet, and for a lot of people it's their feet that they get destroyed, and then that slows their progress down. It causes them pain, discomfort, and before you know it you start to fall behind and lose time on your schedule, maybe even end up towards the cut-offs. So for a lot of longer races, the feet are one of the main issues people have. So even if you've done loads of training, it might be that you've never quite had your feet in that kind of state before. So first of all, we're not really going to cover shoes too much. I'm just going to briefly go over those, and then we're going to go into things like socks and then how to actually deal with your feet themselves. So shoes, basically you've got a couple of options. So you can get Gore-Tex lined shoes in some models. So some brands do a shoe and it'll usually say GTX or Gore-Tex or something like that in the name of the shoe. And these have got like a Gore-Tex membrane in, like your waterproof jacket will, and that'll stop water from going through the shoe quite as easily. The only problem with that is your typical shoe, on your foot, it's not coming like up your leg like a welly or anything, it's only right around the ankle. So if you stand in anything, deeper than this, or if you get splashes of rain onto your leg that dribble down into your shoe, or if it's raining heavy and the water's just running down your legs, or maybe if it's really hot and you're tipping water over your head and that's running into your shoe, then you are still going to get water into your shoes. So whilst they will let a bit of water out, they sometimes can hold the shoe full of water as well. So bear that in mind with the Gore-Tex shoes. Personally, I don't normally buy Gore-Tex shoes. I have had a pair, they're okay, but like I say, it doesn't make too much difference, because if I'm going somewhere where it's going to be wet, it's probably going to be running down my legs and into the shoe anyway. So to me, not something that I tend to consider. So that's shoes. You have also got like hiking boots. So if you're doing something really long, sort of spine, or like some of these non-stop 200-mile race type things, you might consider even a hiking boot, which if your pace is going to be slow and you are going to be hiking more, then it might be more appropriate for you. There are some lightweight ones. You can have a little look around, just jump into your local running shop, have a look. And if not, there are some online, so I might try and find a link for you. But moving on from shoes, the next thing we're looking at is socks. So I've tried everything in an attempt to keep my feet dry, because there's nothing worse than getting wet feet and them falling to bits. So you can paint your shoes with things like this, waterproofing, all kinds of things. And I'm joking, by the way, but you can try all these different things, and at the end of the day your shoe is only so tall. So like I say, if there's any water deeper than this, it's going to go over and into the shoe. So with the socks, the first thing I ever heard of when I was kind of having this problem of keeping my feet dry was these waterproof socks. I'm not going to mention the brand, I don't think. It has got a logo on here, but it ends in skins and begins with seal. And these are sort of the ones that you'll probably come across. And when I heard them, I thought great, and I bought about 5 or 6 different pairs. And then, later found out they aren't actually waterproof. So although they're sold as waterproof, the water still leaks in, you still get wet feet wearing them. So to me, waste of money. They were quite expensive for socks, and they didn't actually work, which is quite a big problem. So I basically use these on a few training runs, like just out on my own. I think I did a couple of smaller ultras with them, and then I tried to use them on the spine, and within 70 miles they had shredded the top of my feet. So when you have them on, they feel okay for a few minutes, but the water just soaks through pretty quickly when you have them on. So this is like the top of the foot here. There is a big seam here, and if you feel it, it's like a real big ridge compared to a normal seam. And this was like grating on the top of my toes for, like I said, the first 70 miles. So my spine race was pretty much over. I did finish it, but had to go the final 200 miles, had to just sort of limp along really, and I was in a lot of pain. So I would never ever recommend those to anybody. And like I say, they aren't waterproof, so they just don't work. So worst sort of running product I've ever tried. So what do you do if then the waterproof socks aren't actually waterproof? Well, first thing I do normally is just wear normal sort of sports socks, so not super thin, but just normal, you know, ankle socks. So they go in above the ankle bone, so when you've got those little bony points on the outside and inside of your ankle, they go just above those, but not like all the way up your leg. So the reason I wear these and not these kind of little ankle socks is because these little ankle socks, you tend to get stones and debris coming in the back, just either side of your Achilles. And also they can kind of slip off a little bit, and you end up sometimes the back of your shoe can rub into the Achilles, which is a bit uncomfortable. In terms of waterproofness, they're not waterproof, they're not meant to be. They are cheap and they do last quite long. But like I say, I prefer ones just a little bit taller, and then it just protects my ankle around the top of the shoe, stops it from rubbing there. These are, I don't know what brand these are, but I normally use Carrymore, which are just cheap ones from Sport Direct, and they've been great for me. Other options, you can get these like compression socks, which these are X-Bionic. They're a fancy sock with all kinds of different sock technology in them apparently. And to me, I didn't really like them that much. They were sort of tight fitting, so they're squeezing your toes together, and you know, just generally didn't feel that comfortable compared to normal socks. You can get toe socks, which are a brand you'll probably not be able to pronounce it either, but it looks like Injinji, and they're basically like toe socks, so like a glove where you've got like individual fingers, you actually have individual toes on the sock. So some people really like them because they were struggling with getting blisters between the toes. So if that's a problem you have, then it'd be worth trying those socks. It's not a problem I have. I have had a few pairs of those socks, and I didn't find they lasted very long compared to just a cheap basic sports sock. They were comfortable enough, but they were just difficult to get on. So I didn't buy any more, but like I said, they were okay. I didn't mind them. So what I, like I say, normally do, normal sports sock. And then what I've got as well is these Coolmax socks. So I think Coolmax is the brand, but it's basically like a synthetic, like kind of feels a bit woolly. It's like a hiking sock, so it's similar size, but it's just a bit thicker and just gives a bit more protection. So later on in an ultra, if your feet are getting a bit battered, these will just give your feet a bit more protection against the inside of the shoe. So whereas normally on a sort of, you know, maybe 50-mile race where you're only out for half a day, you know, maybe 10, 12 hours, something like that, you might not need these, you might just be okay with normal socks. But if you are finding, you know, your feet are rubbing around in the shoe quite a lot, these will give you a bit more protection. And then the other option, to keep the actual water from running out of your shoe, you could use these gaiters. I've never actually worn these, I got them thinking they might be an idea. But basically what they do is go around the top of the shoe and just stop debris coming in. They'll also stop water running down your leg and into the shoe, unless it comes in the top here. Excuse me. So, as you can see, we've got a lot of different options. And to be honest, the best thing is to obviously prevent damage from happening to your feet before it gets in a bad way. So one thing I know normally I don't do anything to my feet, they're normally fine. But like I say, if they are going to cause trouble, what I would do first is just use Vaseline. So it's just, you know, just normal Vaseline. You can get a bigger tub, and I just put it into these little tins to use just when I'm on the run. But you could maybe have a bigger tub in a drop bag or something, and basically just smear your feet with that. So that just gives them like a bit of a slippery barrier and just helps to protect them. So that's what I would, like I say, normally do first. So if I can feel something rubbing in my shoe, maybe I'm running along, you know, and just randomly the shoes that you normally wear for your training, suddenly they just start running on race day, then you can smear a little bit of that on, and you know, just helps the foot there, and that might be fine. So like for example the Chester Ultra, I got to Delamere, which is about a 30-mile into a 100-mile race, and randomly there was my foot starting to rub. So I smeared a bit of that on and then didn't hear anything all the way to the end of the race. It was absolutely fine and didn't have any trouble to the end. But that was like the first time I could feel it. So I could feel this little tiny rub, and literally didn't even run a whole mile since then. Stopped about 2 or 3 minutes later and dealt with it there and then. I didn't wait till the checkpoint, 2 or 3 miles later. I just did it right away, get myself sorted, because a little rub can soon escalate and turn something much worse. So that would be, like I say, the first thing. And then if you do take your shoe off and perhaps you find there's already a blister there or something is already rubbing, so what I would do then, first of all, some sort of antiseptic wipe. So you can get these like alcohol-free ones. Literally just wipe the area with that just to keep it clean. And then what we're looking to do then is cover the blister and cover the area. So if it's already popped, then it's, the protective sort of cushion of fluid is gone. So you need to sort of cover it up there and then. If you have got a blister and there's like still some fluid there, if you can leave it and it's going to be okay, then I would just leave it and carry on. Rather than popping it. So if you can cover it and just keep it going and it won't, burst, then that's fine. But if it is going to burst, then, make sure you clean it up. And then, what you're going to need to do. So I would, like I say, clean it up, put a blister plaster on. So they're a bit thicker than normal plaster, they look like this, in different sizes. So you've got your blister plaster on now, after you've cleaned it. And then what you're going to do is put some sort of padding over it. So you can get this like low adhesive dressing. It's just like a little piece of gauze type stuff. Not very absorbent, but you've already got the blister plaster on, so this is just cushioning on top. You can get something a bit more substantial, which is like a thick piece of foam. This is going to obviously squeeze into your shoe as well, so you can't have something too big, like you can tape a cushion onto your foot, but this is just like a little bit more cushioning. I've still never used that, but it's there, and it's just a bigger version of this. And then once you've done that, you can either use tape straight away. So I like to use this. This is Elastoplast waterproof strapping. It's just like, it looks like the plaster material that you just put on a normal cut, but it's a whole tape of it. And this is a waterproof tape by Elastoplast. So there's a few other brands, but Elastoplast one did seem to stick better than the other ones. So what you would do is either use the tape onto the dressing you've just put on, or what you could do as well is put a stretch bandage around. So this is just a little roll of it, you can see. You could put this around the area, so maybe wrap it around the foot, and then tape around that as well. So in order of a little run through, clean it, blister plaster, some sort of padding, so non-adhesive dressing, and then optional bandage, and then tape, okay? And that should keep it pretty solid, even if it's wet. Even if it's getting wet, it should keep it pretty solid, keep it pretty comfortable. So one thing to remember, when you're taping your foot, you need to make sure it's tight enough that it's not going to move the dressing. So you don't want the dressing just to unravel and fall off. But also, you don't want to put it too tight so that it's like restricting your foot. So for example, let's say this is my ankle, and let's say there's a little blister on my heel here. So if I'm wrapping around the ankle here, and maybe I go underneath the foot, so what I'm doing then is I'm actually tightening this joint up here, I'm tightening around the ankle. So if I do that too much, then it's going to restrict my ankle's dorsiflexion and plantarflexion. So when I'm walking uphill, it's going to be like straining my Achilles, and it's going to feel a little bit tight and cause some more sort of discomfort somewhere else. So I had that once, a race in Poland. It was 250k, something like that. It was like 130 mile in the mountains, and just near the end I could feel a little bit of a blister on my heel, just where I'd had something in my shoe and got lazy and not taken it out. So after a few minutes, like I say, I taped it up, but I just taped it a bit too tight, so it was just causing my Achilles on that side to be, it just felt like a little bit strained. So after sort of walking along wondering what was up, I cut the tape back off and just retaped it a little bit more gently, and it was absolutely fine after that. So just make sure you're not constricting any joints or, stopping the blood flow of anything. Don't wrap anything too tight. So I have all those things I've just mentioned in there. So I've just put them in, that's the foil blanket, and I've just squashed them in. So The tape is not in there, but I've got the other stuff in there as well, and then I'll just have the tape separate. So a good thing to have, if you're doing a particularly long race, you might need to dress your feet a couple of times, so you might want to put those in a drop bag, have like a supply of them, and then just carry a few pieces of those items just to get you going to the checkpoint. So one thing I did do when I did the spine, it got to the point that everything was that wet and my feet were that cut to bits really. There was nowhere to really stick anything, like any of the dressings. There was no really good skin to stick them on. So in the end I just ended up smearing my feet literally in Vaseline, so smearing loads on and just kept going, and obviously it was painful, but it got me to the end and I finished the race. Now my feet, they have got some scars on the top, but you know, it didn't cause any lasting damage and they didn't get infected or anything like that, so worth thinking about. And like I say, in terms of foot care, obviously the ideal is to stop them getting into a bad way in the first place, rather than try and fix it when they do. So like I say, be proactive with your foot care, try and keep them clean and try and get them dry as best you can. So you might just be swapping socks regularly, you know, through a race, if their feet are getting wet. Personally, I just try and keep going. I don't like messing about and changing gear when I'm going. I just like to get going and move. But if there is something that's, I think it's going to cause more of an issue, then I will stop and change it. So like I say, most races I've done, I don't change socks, like, you know, your typical one-day ultras, like 100 milers, 50 milers and so on. I don't normally change my socks at all, but occasionally, you know, there comes a time when I might. So it's always good to have the option. And yeah, like I say, failing that, you know, if it's all going wrong, nice little saw in your drop bag, and what's usually best is just off at the ankle here, just above there. So that will prevent any foot problems pretty quickly, but it's not really a long-term solution. So just bear that in mind, and hopefully you don't cut your own foot off, please don't. But that is what I would suggest for foot care. So hope you found it useful. If you do have any questions, if there's anything I've forgotten, then just drop me a comment below and let me know. Other than that, over and out. Have fun.